had that before COVID. We used to have.
Yes.
Oh yeah, so we're planning, or I'll be bugging.
Yeah.
people
Wait a
about
second,
that
after being on
probably,
weekend.
so.
It's summertime.
Exactly. John's wearing a jacket.
We were just talking.
Okay, you ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready.
Nicole?
Hi. Hello. Oh,
Yeah,
I felt all cash. I was thought
formal. We need formal Nicole.
formal.
Okay, everybody. Thanks very much to Bill and Sydney for being here. And we got a brand new reporter for the Bridge FM with us all the way from Ottawa, Ontario. And could you just introduce yourself to council.
My name is Justin Baumgartner. I am the news reporter for 103.5 The Bridge. I have actually in the past run for municipal council in my hometown of Penticton, Ontario, where I lost by 40 votes. I know the whole premise was you were going to run a father and son board, and he won. I didn't. So maybe I'll run again in Nelson. Who knows?
That'll be a big mistake. This guy will print anything you want for a fee. Anyway, thanks very much for being here, and it's great to see people finally coming back to council chambers, getting things more or less back to normal. So with that, we've called the meeting to order, and I'd like to start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Kootenay, the Silix and Sinix peoples, and is home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour the connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And we have any late items from council? Hearing none, we have one here request from the Chamber of Commerce for assistance for the Canada Day celebrations at the park. I think everybody in council may have got that email, so I'll be looking for somebody on, where we put that, Sarah? Late items number 13. I'll be looking for somebody to jump in with that one at that time to either offer up assistance or not. Okay? So that'll go in as number 13. So with that, I'd like to adopt the agenda with the addition of the late item, please. Councillor Charlwood, Councillor Renwick, all in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. Adoption of the minutes of the previous meetings of April the 5th, May the 3rd, and the regular council meeting of May the 3rd.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Renwick. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Recommendations to the committee of the whole, there are none. Meeting requests, Nelson and District Arts Council, Mural request, and we have Sydney here to give us a little bit of a background on this. So while you're walking up there, I won't do an introduction, but I will about the agenda item. The Nelson District Arts Council has requested that council allow 2 murals to be painted on city-owned property. Council is now requested to approve or deny the use of the city-owned sites for the proposed designs. And Sydney, do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown? We haven't had one in person about murals for a couple of years, so.
It's been a little while. So we're just bringing forward 2 proposals today. One is for the rear of the Capitol Theatre. It's by a Sinaixt artist. Her name is Emma Noyce. She's from Spokane, or she lives in Spokane currently. She's very excited at the potential of coming up here. She's going to bring her children and her husband here and have an opportunity to spend some time in their traditional territory, which is so exciting for them. And we also have a piece that is being proposed by Weimar-based artist Damien John, who's an Indigenous artist as well. This piece is proposed for the retaining wall that is in between the Salvation Army and the old Nelson Cares building. The Nelson Cares building, yeah. I was like, and yeah, so we're just really looking at kind of livening up that space that needs a little bit of love. So we're really excited. We've had conversations with the Salvation Army around that space and Slava Val's Dance Fusion as well, because they use that space quite frequently, and they are both excited about the piece as well. So yeah, that is what I have to
That's it
propose.
in a nutshell. And you see from the report here that we've received from the Nelson District Arts Council with Joy's name on it, and I'm sure council's had an opportunity to go through that, And hopefully enough of you have read it that somebody is willing to make a motion to support this project. Councillor Charlwood and Councillor Woodward. Mover and seconder. Did you wish to speak to it, Councillor Charlwood?
Just thanks, especially for that space down on the retaining wall. So much love needed there. I have to admit, when I saw it, I thought it felt dark for that space. So I'm happy to hear that you've, checked in with others, and I have by no means want to impose any, artistic question, but I love how it's challenging me, even in my thoughts about what should go in these spaces. And you do the work so well in terms of connecting, so thank you.
All right, so the motion is that council approve the use of the north-facing wall of the Capitol Theatre in front of 412 Victoria Street for a mural proposed by the Nelson District Arts Council and designed by Emma Noyes. Is that right? All in favour? Carried. And number 2, that council, sorry, I'll keep an eye on you, Councillor Morrison, didn't forget about you there. So the council approves the use of the north-facing retaining wall between the Salvation Army and the old Nelson Cares building for a mural proposed by the Nelson District Arts Council and designed by Damien John. Is that right?
You a mover on that?
I need a mover and a seconder for that.
I'll
Councillor
move, and I have a question.
Councillor Woodward moved, and you're seconding, I hope, and you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, within the budget on this one, and appreciating the seclusion of that particular space, I'm wondering, it seems to me that piece needs to have some consideration around lighting. And do we need to think about what kind of lighting is down there that will be complementary to both the space and to the piece, as opposed to any and all light bulbs that might exist?
Absolutely. So we don't usually navigate lighting as the Mural Festival. However, that entire area, it kind of feels like is in need, like the stairs potentially are needing a little sort of jiffying and things like that. So we would be very interested in furthering that conversation with the city and talking about that and how we can light it as best possible so that it's safe for the people that are using that space, as well as, illuminating the mural as it should be. But yeah, that's definitely a conversation that we're open to, but it's not something that we possess the budget for readily. So it's something that we would have to investigate funding.
Okay.
Can I just comment? So walking back from there after dinner, so that whole stairwell is
Terrible shape.
Yeah,
A hazard.
It needs to be replaced. Ultimately, it's been on our list for a while now. So just, hopefully the mural isn't, I think it doesn't.
There's
touch
nothing
the-
affixed to
behind
the
the
wall at all,
stairs.
Yeah.
totally. So it's mostly attached to the Salvation Army building. So it wouldn't, if you removed the stairwell, it wouldn't damage the mural
Okay.
at all. So
So, yeah, things like lighting and all that, I think, has to be planned with a potential replacement of those stairs down the road. We obviously have to engage with the building owners
Both building
because
owners,
those are, they use our central stairway as access to their property. So it's a project that we're aware of, but it's going to take some time to, really figure that one out.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Page, for the question. All right. All in favour? Carried. How are the egg sales going?
very well, Mayor Dooley, very well. Lots of eggs going out of the back of my aunt's truck every other weekend.
Excellent.
So
All right.
if you need some, let me know.
There you go. Just an opportunity to give a little plug there. So. All right.
Sid.
Take care. Thanks
Thank
very
you so
much,
much.
Sid.
Thanks,
Sid.
All right. Okay, next is Friends of Kootenay Lake Stewardship Society request. On April the 22nd, 2022, the Friends of Kootenay Lake Stewardship Society conducted an Earth Day cleanup of the city's lakeshore with the result of collection of 3.22 tons of trash. Woo.
Wow.
That is a lot of shopping carts. The total cost for the disposal of the trash amount to $1,083.08. There's a request that the City of Nelson cover the cost for the disposal. There's a report in front of you of the good work that they did. And there's also a recommendation, if someone wished to move it. Councillor Renwick and Councillor Lochtenberg. and that council approve the Friends of Kootenay Lake Stewardship Society request to pay for tipping fees incurred in the disposal of trash collected from Kootenay Lake on April 22nd, 2022, to the amount of $1,083.08, which includes $440 approved in 2021. Questions or comments?
Question for staff, please. CFO Jury, do we have 1,083.08 to throw at this?
I think we can find that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Just checking with the new guy, that's all.
That looks like a tire of yours there, Councillor. Pretty sure that's your dog too. Okay, any further questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much. All right, onward and upward. Minor variance. The province of British Columbia has received enacted, what is that, enacted, is that what that says? Enacted, yeah. Changes to the Local Government Act, which allows local governments to delegate decisions on minor development variance permits to staff. If council would like to do so, it must delegate this authority by bylaw. As such, staff are now proposing that council adopt the Delegation Amendment Bylaw number 3242 and Development Application Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 3543. And once again, there's a full package of information. Why? Maybe why not? And a complete layout of the actual bylaw that exists. So in front of us, there's a recommendation, actually two recommendations from staff. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Page. Either one of you want to speak to it? Councillor Renwick?
I have a question. After we did the first readings, I'm just, I guess a question for staff, probably for CEO Cormac, in that the variance that we did on Macquarie, would that be considered a minor variance?
I think our Director of Development Services, Sebastian Arcan, spoke to that. I think there was two variances there that night, and he said, you know, this one would be minor, that one wouldn't have been a minor variance. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? You okay, Janice? You're hearing us still? Thank you.
Do we need two votes on that, Mayor?
Yes, we have a second one.
Right.
That the Development Application Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 3543, 2022 be finally adopted.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Charlwood. Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Charlwood. All in favor? Thank you, Gary. Thanks very much. Okay, next one up is the Public Notice Bylaw. Pursuant to the recent changes to the Community Charter, Public Notice Bylaw number 3551, 2022 is now being presented to Council. The bylaw, if adopted, would require the city's notice to advertise once in the newspaper and also be posted on a public notice leading page on the city's website. Council is now requested to adopt the Public Notice Bylaw 3551. And we had this discussion earlier, and we did get the background from staff, and it's reiterated here, and there's one recommendation in front of us on this file. Councillor Page moved, Councillor Lochtenberg second. Any questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Nelson Hydro grant application. And following council direction to submit a grant application to CleanBC to add battery energy storage to the Nelson Hydro grid, staff are now requesting a resolution committing the city to funding its share of the project if the grant application is successful, and as detailed below, the city's share of the project would be 4.6 million and would be drawn from Nelson Hydro capital reserves. And we have Scott here to help us out, and he's got a assistant with him to help also with this presentation tonight. So Scott, we'll let you two folks have a kick at this can early on, and then we'll be asking for a resolution and comments from council. Is that okay?
That's perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity to come back with more information for Council on the battery energy storage system that was proposed in May.
Just want to let council know we have one other person on here now. I can see Christine, but I can't read the last name.
Christine
Here's-
Boehringer, yes.
Pardon?
Christine Boehringer.
Okay, and you can hear us okay, Christine?
I can,
Try again?
Christine's gone to let the dog out.
And Mr. Mayor, Christine is the project manager who led the application development. And I will be turning it over to Christine to provide some more details on the project, and then to Chris to provide some of the
Okay.
technical
All
information.
right, Chris. So Christine, if you don't mind, just give us a couple of sentences to make sure we're hearing you okay?
sure. It's Christine Boehringer here, and I'm calling in remotely from the Dead Man Valley near Kamloops. How's that?
Thank you very much. All right. And we still have Janice. She's good. All right, carry on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a month ago, I introduced council to an opportunity that Nelson Hydro was exploring in terms of a battery energy storage system. And the project team has put a lot of work in the past month to pull that application together. And I'm happy to say that we were successfully able to meet the deadline of May 25th. And the application has been submitted for a total capital cost of 16.7 million, which, if you remember, is higher than what we had originally anticipated. And we'll speak to some of the details that evolved to that total. And I remember last week, Mr. Mayor, you asked me about the project, and is this the right project for Nelson Hydro at this time? And I've put a lot of thought into that, and I want to just review a little bit of some of the things that I spoke to last presentation in terms of the work going into identifying the projects. And we did have Prism Engineering do a load management study. And as part of their scope, they looked at all options that would help us identify ways to increase capacity. And they were very thorough. They looked at previous project proposals that have been put together. They did a market survey, an environmental scan to see what's the trends are in the industry, how are other utilities solving these problems. And they looked at what applied to Nelson Hydro. And from that, their conclusions were that demand-side management and energy conservation are clearly the most effective way to reduce demand and to help with the capacity challenges that Nelson Hydro and utilities around the world are facing currently as the push for electrification moves forward. Nelson Hydro has been looking at those, will continue to look at those, and it's clear to us that we know that to advance, to make any more significant inroads in energy conservation and demand-side management, we need to implement our advanced metering infrastructure project, which Council is aware of. It's started this year for us. So we are moving forward with that. The other projects that we looked at, like micro or small hydro that have been explored in the region, those projects are all quite costly for the amount of energy that we can get for those. And even the BEST project or the battery storage project at double the cost that we had originally thought, those projects are still much more expensive than what the battery storage system can provide for the same number of benefits. And when we actually look at sort of the types of projects that are available within our region, if you added them all together and implemented them, they still wouldn't even reach half of what the capacity increase we're able to achieve with the BEST that's proposed at 5 megawatts. So that's the reason that we're looking at the battery storage project. Is it the best project for Nelson Hydro at this time? The answer is yes. Is this project economically viable without economic supports in the form of this grant opportunity? No, it is not. And CleanBC and the federal government investing in Canada infrastructure programs are designed specifically for these types of situations, to support communities like ours that are willing to take the risks and do something different to try and move the dial on climate change and make a difference in greenhouse gases. I've engaged with BC Hydro and Fortis BC on this. They both have significant commitments to look at and install battery storage system. BC Hydro has even stated that by 2030 they're expecting to have 800 megawatts of battery storage installed in BC to resolve that issue, because they feel that there's opportunity there. They have both BC Hydro and Fortis BC have provided letters of support to our battery storage project because they would really like to see this succeed and to become a model that they would be able to replicate in other areas. So we have an opportunity here. I am happy to present to council, and I have a really great team that's put together a fabulous application for us, and they will be going through the presentation. The purpose that I would like to have for today is to provide council with enough of an understanding of the project and what we're doing to give you the confidence that that this is a project that worth advancing and continuing the application for. And at the end of it, of course, we will be looking for council to consider that resolution to approve the funding and committing the City of Nelson funds in the form of Nelson Hydro Capital Reserves to this project. It is a requirement of the grant application. We have until the 24th of June in order to be able to have that submitted into CleanBC in order to be able to move the project to the next stage, which is now, the evaluation stage. It's a long time frame project. The funding is expected to be available not until September 2023, and we must be spent by by 2027. So we have time, and I'd really like to introduce council to Christine Boehringer. She's a project manager, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and her credentials because she's done a fantastic job of putting together this application for Nelson Hydro. So Christine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Scott. Just to give, as Scott said, a bit of an introduction of my background. So I've completed approximately 60 projects for BC Hydro and 20 projects for other organizations since 1994. So I have a fair amount of project management experience. I am a Project Management Institute certified. I have a Master's Certificate in Project Management and a Master's of Business Administration. So just, I'm glad that the audio was working well, but I did want to take this opportunity to just say, this was a great opportunity to work with a group of highly skilled individuals on this project. So it's been a great opportunity. With that, we'll skip over to the scope slide. And just to kick it off about scope. So one of the first things we were required to do on the project was to define a project location. And so we looked at 12 sites.
Sorry, Christine.
And we quickly narrowed it.
You're breaking up quite a bit. Can you speak in, lean in a little closer, so maybe that would help?
Maybe turn off the camera.
Okay, great, try.
Turn off the camera.
So, how's that?
No, maybe turn off your camera. That might be the other option.
Okay. It is over satellite.
Do I draw that bandwidth as well, you guys? I mean, I can turn off my video. She sounds perfect to me. Unbelievable. I'm in Vancouver and she's perfect sound to me. I'm going to turn off my camera as well. Maybe it'll decrease the activity in the...
Okay. Is that any better?
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Christine.
You bet. Okay, so just wanted to talk about the project sites. So we started with sites, and we quickly narrowed it down to two. One site is the Canaris Road site, And the second one, of course, is Nelson Hydro's Bonington Falls site. Both of these sites are pre-disturbed or considered brownfield sites, and we're anticipating that as a result, the environmental and archaeological potential is low for both sites. The team proceeded through consultation and engagement activities, which to date proved positive support for the project. As Scott mentioned, we've received some very positive letters of support for the project. We received 10 in total, which we included with the grant application. Confirmation of the federal grant award, should that happen, it's not expected until the fall of 2023. We proceed with procurement activity. In that we have civil work, which would include clearing and leveling of the site, prepping it for the batteries and ancillary equipment, and then on delivery of the batteries and equipment, we'd move through construction and commissioning to go live. Schedule slide. Schedule, we're approaching this project very conservatively. We've allowed a lot of time for each of the steps along the way, and we have time to complete the work by the grant funding cutoff of March 2027. So, consultation, environmental permitting, and property-related decision activity that can proceed and be funded after the provincial approval in principle and prior to federal confirmation of grant award. So we do have a bit of time in that in-between period where we can actually do funded work. We've allowed 2 years in the schedule for supply batteries due to the current and obviously expected ongoing supply chain issues that we've experienced recently. And we feel that 2 years is quite conservative, and we are anticipating that perhaps it'll be quicker to delivery than that. The in-service and project completion dates, as you can see, are separated by 3 months. And the intent of that is to allow time for record drawings to be completed and reviewed, all the tests from commissioning to be reviewed and finalized, to give us some time for staff training. We need to then close the contracts, release holdbacks, that sort of stuff, and all of the documentation associated with the project. You want to switch to the next slide. So, this project we did consultation with 17 Indigenous bands or nations, and we also engaged stakeholders and large customers. As I said, we received 10 letters of support for this project, which speaks to the level of confidence stakeholders and customers have in the work that we're hoping to deliver with this project. So you can see in the slide, associated with the Penticton Indian Band Cultural Heritage Review Site Assessment. That's noted in site-specific activity. First Nations, they have the opportunity to attend these sites, the 2 sites, and do a tour to identify any cultural or heritage values that may be requiring preservation or accommodation once the project rolls forward. Examples of these cultural or heritage values might include things like medicinal plants that can be found on site, any culturally modified trees, middens, or other artifacts that might be found on site. So in order to accommodate findings that we're not sure whether there will be any or not, we've built time into the schedule so that we can accommodate this work and any requirements that come out of it. Procurement slide. For this project, procurement includes services and construction, in addition to the engineering, supply, and commissioning of the battery system and equipment. Each includes points to be awarded for companies that can prove Indigenous inclusion. So either having Indigenous staff within their company or providing some financial benefit to First Nations. So we will award points for that. Alternatively, if there are any Indigenous-owned companies, then there will also be points awarded for that during the procurement review. So Indigenous-owned companies, we're sticking with a very defined description. So they have to be 51% interest, controlling interest by an Indigenous person, band, or nation. And we're very specific about that designation. The financial skill and experience criteria, though, those still remain the most significant factor in our evaluation matrix of proposals that we get for the project. We're planning for the best supplier to be the prime contractor for the construction of the project. This will shift construction and commissioning risk away from Nelson Hydro to the contractor. Process, we also have a construction manager and an owner's engineer that will be involved to ensure Nelson Hydro's interests are continue to be protected throughout the process. Okay, next slide, the grant application overview. For this grant application, I applied under the category of increased capacity to manage renewable energy, as the project will shave demand peaks that were identified by Prism Engineering in their options analysis study. Prism also identified this grant opportunity to assist in offsetting the cost. The greenhouse gas assessment was completed by the Community Energy Association, and they evaluated the battery system against distributed diesel generation, and the result positively supported the battery system application. And that report was also attached to the application. The project team will review and determine whether there is a BCUC submission requirement. And we have sufficient time in the schedule to accommodate that step if a submission is required as we proceed. Battery technology, of course, is becoming more common, and this will be the second battery installation in BC, but it is, of course, the first in this region. It's an opportunity for Nelson Hydro to be a leader and to showcase this technology for other communities who may be considering a similar system. And there is a lot of interest right now in these battery energy storage systems from all over BC. So with that in mind, unless there's questions for me specifically, or we can come back to them, I'll turn this over to Chris to walk us through the technical aspects of the project and the cost-benefit analysis.
Any questions for Christine and her presentation? Christine, I had a couple, if you don't mind. On the Indigenous component, I think that's a great idea, and of course it's part of what we're doing nowadays. How would that, as an example, impact local hire? If we were given points as an example to a contractor that had partners from Indigenous partners, would that rule out, as an example, Martech Electric that may not, and they're local, hiring local people?
Not necessarily. I've worked with Martech in the past, and they do have Indigenous staff, or they did at the time. So they want points for that. We have approximately 10% of the points to be awarded through the procurement process are for that designation.
Okay.
And there are actually other very large contractors in the Nelson area that are owned by Indigenous organizations. So I'm actually quite confident that we will local suppliers either way.
Okay, thank you. That's good. I'm glad to get that cleared up. The other one was, I noticed you didn't have a line item on embodied carbon there. Or battery recycling
Embodied.
carbon.
Oh, okay. Right. I don't know that I have an answer, and I don't know that I quite understand the question. That might be a Chris question.
Yeah, I think that might be something that that Chris could answer, or maybe even during his presentation, if you would be willing to speak to that, Chris, on the technical scope, because the batteries themselves will form the majority of that, because beyond the batteries, it's just fencing and
Yeah.
and
And
other
then the
ancillaries.
recycling component of the life cycle of the battery, etc. Okay,
So I think probably from Christine's perspective is, that should be a factor in our scoring matrix, the life cycle costs of including disposal and procurement. What's the embodied carbon in the procurement and production of that, and then the disposal of that. And we've done that. We did that just recently in another organics project we're doing, and the company did part of theirs is they had to provide that life cycle costing of what that is.
thank you, Christine.
Okay.
I don't think there's other questions for you at this point, but don't go away.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Chris Smith. I'm a local resident. Moved here with my family in the fall of 2020, so it's kind of quite a pleasure, a bit surreal to be sitting here before you to talk about batteries. I'll introduce myself. I work on behalf of Terek Power and Eureka Energy Management. My background is in energy marketing or energy markets. I've spent the better part of the last 20 years in power, gas, oil, different jurisdictions, pricing mechanisms, asset valuation, risk management, traded shops, and so on. Recently, on behalf of Terek and Eureka, I've been advising more in a business development role. And so we've been exploring projects to look at low carbon hydrogen into electricity. And then of late for me, it's been a lot more focus on battery energy storage systems. To give you a bit of background on Terek and Eureka, they are, to our knowledge, the developer of the largest operating battery energy storage systems in Canada to date. There are 2 systems, both 20 megawatts each, operating in Alberta. There's a third under construction that should be online later this year, and there are 3 more in the pipeline. And so the expertise that the team I represent brings to the table and the experience is vast and very deep, and was deployed on behalf of Nelson Hydro in seeking approval of this grant application. And so, yeah, if there are any questions, obviously feel free to ask them. I'm going to talk a bit about systems themselves, talk about the market, and then get into the cost aspects that Scott has touched on already. So battery systems themselves, we think of them like energy Swiss Army knives. And I can tell you that as more of these systems are being deployed in jurisdictions and power grids globally, they are a bit of a challenge for regulators. And the reason is because at any given time, a battery can be demand, it can be supply, it can be backup, it can support frequency. It is literally a Swiss Army knife from an energy system standpoint. I was listening to a podcast recently, and in the UK, there are batteries that have provided 5 different services in a 24-hour period to kind of give you an idea of the flexibility that these systems offer. And really unlocking that through optimization is one of the key opportunities that we see and are very excited about. If you think about a battery at a high level, it's like the battery in your phone. They will degrade over time, and they don't like the cold. But when you start to get in larger and larger systems, they throw off a lot of heat. And so depending on the layout, on the technology, and on the type of system, you may have some noise with venting of heat, usually in a vertical matter. So it's just a consideration we wanted to make note of early in the process. The warranty really matters. and the vendor matters in our experience. And so ensuring that you have a system that functions for the life of the project.
Can you use that heat?
Well, it's not that much heat, in my understanding. It's a great question, but I would say at this point, it's probably not worth trying to harvest. Yeah. Yeah. So the warranty really matters, is really kind of, and the vendor from this standpoint. I would say that optimizing these systems is a lot of science and a bit of art. I think at this point in time, this is a combination of human intelligence and experience and analysis and so on. There's a lot of capital, both in dollars and time and human energy being deployed to add the science to this. And so we'll see in coming years if there are off-the-shelf systems to better optimize these technologies. One of the things we are excited about is that the technology continues to evolve. So over the last 3 years, we've seen the capacity and duration of these systems increase, and more exciting for us is the ability to cycle these batteries on a daily basis with, like, largely speaking, the same technology and composition as before. And that there are a number of technologies that are moving from lab kind of readiness to field to potentially larger production, things like iron state batteries and flow batteries and solid state batteries and so on. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities coming. But in some on this slide, it's a simple concept, but it's a pragmatically challenging technology to get right.
Chris, after reading this weekend and what have you, and there's a line in here that technology continues to evolve, increasing capacity, duration, and cycles. And I can't help but think about sort of the first original cell phone and now. And is that a concern for us? Because if it is evolving that much, are we going to be the guy that bought the first VCR for $2,000 and 5 years later they're $199 a piece?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, if you need a phone, you're going to buy it at some point, right? It's kind of a quick answer, I would say. And Scott touched, and Christine as well. The timeline here is there's a fair amount of fairway. We're not going to know until late 2023 if both provincial and federal funding are in place. And then there's an internal process to go to the market and RFP it and have someone come in and basically get approved to do the project. And so, Cal, I think if there is new technology that comes on in the next couple of years, you'll have some line of sight to it. And I will talk about it a bit later on in the slides, that I'm going to describe a system that's largely lithium-based, because that is kind of the big technology right now. It's possible something emerges in the meantime, or a vendor is really keen to get the new cell phone in place on behalf of Nelson Hydro. I'm not trying to sidestep the answer there, but it's new technology. There's a lot of demand and a lot of change happening, and I can tell you you'll get what you pay for. What I mean by that is it will be a system that will do what is required through the RFP. And yes, the technology will continue to evolve. So in 5 or 10 years, there might be something much better.
Okay, follow up. So what we don't know, these are not consumer electronics, as the example I gave, which go down in price.
Right.
But in 5 or 7 years, this could be more expensive.
Potentially, and I will speak to the market right now. There could be different technologies in place as well. And the nice thing about batteries is they can be augmented too, right? And so you could think about this. We are proposing a system of a certain size. There's more square footage available there. You could add to it something similar, something different. It's not an end result, but you begin a journey. It's a 20-year journey. And I will speak not necessarily to the embodied carbon, but definitely to how we're thinking about recycling these systems, because I actually think there's potentially more benefit based on what we're learning to keep them in place longer. And so it might be something that comes up at the end of life, right? So it's hard to say. This is not without risk, to be blunt, and we're seeing some of that taking place in the way the market is acting currently, as far as cost goes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Councillor Renwick. Thank you.
So it's a great segue, actually, so thanks for that. After many years of being stable to declining prices, what we really wanted to articulate is that we are seeing some of the inputs for these battery energy systems increase dramatically in price. So the chart is, I think I pulled this about 2 weeks ago. we've seen the cost of lithium carbonate increase by 5 times since the end of 2021. To give an idea, in certain systems, that's about 25% of the raw materials. So it doesn't mean the battery's going up by 5 times, but it certainly means that the battery system is going to increase in price. And so I would say the industry is in shock and kind of trying to figure out how do you move forward after stable or declining prices over such time, and trying to adapt to that. Compounding this, some of the supporting infrastructure like transformers and cable have also increased in cost. We've seen lead times in some cases double, and Christine talked about this in her piece. We've tried to be very conservative with the timeframes for the delivery of the infrastructure because we are seeing this happening right now. And underpinning this really is a massive demand for battery cells. And this is for electric vehicles, it's for grid scale batteries. And when you think about a grid scale battery, which could be a series of C cans, they're comprised of not quite C battery size, but not much different than that. And the same with an electric vehicle. And so it's just the number of batteries that you've got, or the cells in each one of these deployments, and how they're organized and how they're dispatched and arranged. And so as EVs become more mainstream, as battery systems become more mainstream, the demand is increasing, and I think it's exceeded many people's expectations.
So you're saying we should have bought lithium shares rather than Blockbuster?
Well, I would say, Mayor, that if you go back to that chart, it would have been good to be long lithium carbonate about 12 months ago. Yeah, so that probably would have been okay. I would say that I've called it a war for cells, basically, and it is. We've actually heard some of the vendors reference that. They're trying to figure out within their businesses, okay, is it going to go to the electric vehicles or does it go to the battery energy storage systems? How do you do both, right? And so these are difficult problems. One of the challenges we're seeing is that vendors they're basically now wanting to share some of that price risk with their customers. And so there was a time where you could order a battery, you'd get it in 12 months, and you would know what it would cost. There's a bit more uncertainty around that now. With all of that said, going back to the timelines, we do think there's an opportunity for this project to, I wouldn't say miss some of this, but to be well positioned. My view is that for the near term, the next 12 months, the prices, whether it's lithium carbonate or other pieces of infrastructure, are going to continue to be where they're at now, if not higher. But beyond that, as you get into 12 to 24 months or beyond, in my experience in energy, you typically see high prices produce a couple of different results. One of them is you reduce demand. People can't afford batteries in this example. Or you can see new technologies come online. Okay, and so things that were previously uneconomic, supply that wasn't really there before, can now have a viable business case. And so we think in the next kind of 2 to 4 to 5 years that becomes a definite opportunity as well. And so going back to this project, I think Christine summarized it really well. Nelson Hydro has an opportunity to be a leader in BC, and maybe there's a vendor who wants to be a leader as well. We're not sure. So we do think that is a silver lining as far as the timing goes, the project.
Could I ask you a question on that last slide there?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
No, not at all.
Okay. Vendors sharing cost risk. So I just made a note here earlier on, and that's something that actually came to my mind after we had our last discussion, Scott, was, that Fortis and BC Hydro, and when we were out at the site, Blair, talked about how Fortis is very interested in this. What's the chances of them carrying some of this risk first if they're so interested in the project?
Well, I'll maybe defer to Scott, or would it be okay if we put a bookmark on that and come back to it, Mayor? So when he's back in front of what I would say is it's actually a conversation that we've been having, is we're not sure, and I will defer to Scott here, but it's an opportunity. This is a good story, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And there are 800 megawatts of storage, and the word is typically battery in BC's 2021 integrated plan.
Yeah.
And 800 megawatts is a lot of megawatts. And you're going to need to have a few examples like the one we're looking at to increase learning for all those projects. And Ontario too. I think the number in Ontario is over 1,000 megawatts. And so within Canada alone, you've got a significant pipeline. Alberta as well. It's a different process in Alberta because it's deregulated. But we think there should be a lot of interest from some stakeholders in the province and may want to be involved. So we'll come back to that.
Thank you.
It's okay, Mayor, yeah. So as a part of the CleanBC application, the request was to provide basically a site and a layout. One thing I want to emphasize on this slide is this could look very different when it comes to if this is supported and grant funding is in place and it actually is constructed. But based on technology that we've dealt with before and kind of the analysis that we've done, we propose that there would be 5 containers, if you will, best containers, 1 megawatt by 4 hours, and so for a total of 5 megawatts by 20 megawatt hours. Okay, and I'll speak in a little bit about why that is to support those 5 containers. And there's the 5 containers, and there's doors, and that's what's in the diagram there to kind of show that there are access points along there. The transformers are kind of the 3 blocks in between, and there's an outbuilding among other things. One thing I did want to touch on. Should I
It's okay. No,
keep going? Okay, yeah, sure. Is
boss here.
okay, yeah. Is that this is be a fenced area, and there would be lighting, but the lights are only intended to be on in the case that there is maintenance required unexpectedly in the night, as an example. The site will be monitored by cameras, regular cameras, as well as infrared cameras. And the infrared cameras are able to detect intrusions, wildlife, and then for the systems themselves, monitor the heat signature for the batteries. And they do it, so it really does not throw off much at all ambient light unless absolutely necessary. There's obviously civil works required and site preparation that'll be factored in as well.
Chris, can I just ask, and maybe I missed it on Christine's presentation, are we looking at design build or design tender construct?
Tender.
Okay.
So the idea would be there would be an RFP that would detail what needs to be delivered, and there would be a prime contractor that would come in to deliver that. And there are other attributes that Christine touched on, and Christine, if you want to hop back in, feel free, where Nelson Hydro's interest would be protected by having an internal resource to kind of design that RFP and make sure that it's stewarded, the project delivers on expectations. Okay. Do you want to add anything there, Christine?
Yeah, so have we ruled out design build, or we are leaning towards
I'll step
tender?
in there just to be clear. So what Christine was explaining earlier is that the intent is an EPC or a design build contract as the prime for the battery vendor, but we retain the ability to contract some of the smaller pieces like site preparation and fencing and things like that wouldn't be, that will be better handled by us or by smaller local organizations, perhaps, in partnership with First Nations for some of those smaller contracts. But the prime contractor would be the EPC contractor who would,
This would show up and
it would, they hand us the keys when it's all ready to go.
So the project estimate at this time is a total of $16.7 million. The biggest aspect of that is the batteries themselves, as well as the supporting infrastructure and the work required to put the batteries and transformers and conduits and fence in place. I would add some detail on both those items. These are real-world numbers. They are estimates or actual invoices that are weeks old. Some of this as recent as early May. And so they reflect where the market sees pricing for these systems and supporting infrastructure right now. We did and have seen a 25% increase in costs since the end of last year, early part of this year, and that is reflected in the numbers, the top 2 lines there. There is obviously some planning, engineering, and engagement required as well to support the project. The project is also subject to PST, and we've embedded a contingency of 25% into the estimate in the case that the estimate has some omissions, I should say, or that there is cost increase. The requirement from CleanBC was for a Class C estimate, which is plus or minus 25 to 40%. We were quite confident that based on what we know currently, this is much closer to a reliable Class B estimate, and that's why the contingency is more in the 25% range. Okay. As far as the allocation of funds go, the opportunity here is to secure up to 73% of project funding for eligible costs. And we are here to look for support from City Council and Nelson Hydro for the remainder of $4.6 million. So I'd like to talk a bit about the benefits of a system like this. I do want to apologize, the arrows did not paste from Excel in the slides, and I didn't pick up on it until they were already submitted. So, but if you look at that chart, really what I want to highlight, and I picked December 29th last year. This was a peak day. This set a new peak at the end of 2021. Very cold, lots of electrical demand on this day, and that's the blue line. That's the load on an hourly basis. So along the x-axis, we move from 1 a.m. to basically midnight over the course of a day. And the way a battery would add benefit is to kind of turn that blue line into the orange line, if you will. And so if you work your way through the day, you would charge the battery, and you would basically, or you discharge the battery, sorry, and you would increase demand at that point in time. And then when you hit your morning peak and your evening peak, you would discharge the battery to bring the peak down. And so really the idea here is to push up the valleys, if you will, in your energy load and bring the peaks down, okay? And we would look to be doing this most days of the year, particularly when there are large imports from FortisBC, particularly in winter months. This would be a daily event. When we were analyzing Nelson's load profile, we found that it typically had a very residential shape to it, and that blue line reflects it, where you see a morning peak and then a higher evening peak for dinner time. What was surprising to us was there was times of the year, and we typically saw this in February, where we actually saw the morning peak higher than the evening peak. And so that's an anomaly, to be honest, but it was pretty consistent in the data. And this is what informs our recommendation of a longer duration battery system, because the challenge you have is if you just targeted the evening peak for say 4 hours and you reduce that down, that's okay, but the problem is you're leaving that morning peak higher and you're not getting the benefit you're looking for over the course of the day. And so we feel like you need to be able to deploy the system for up to 8 hours on a regular basis to really manage that double peak and the changing of the peak throughout the course of the year. And so that kind of informs it is a longer duration system. The opportunity here is a cost reduction. It's a savings to Nelson Hydro. It's a savings to Nelson Hydro's customers. And so there are two aspects to the tariff with FortisBC, and one of them is based on the power supply charge, which is set based on the peak hour every 11 months rolling. Okay, and so if you can keep that peak lower, there's savings over time. And then each month there's a peak hour as well. And if you can keep both those peaks lower, the battery offers the ability to save costs to the customer base over time, over the duration of the project. And I'll get into what those numbers look like shortly. As far as revenue preservation goes, sure.
So, as an example, with the price of fuel going up, people are changing their ways they drive, right? So maybe if the price of energy, hydro, is more expensive, people might shave it themselves. And thirdly, we make money on selling hydro. So how do you?
That's the return, right? Because we make that same money with we make that same return. We're not buying. We're just paying this extra charge year round because we incurred that peak. So it's not on the energy side, it's on the demand side that we're savings.
We don't pass that charge on to the customer.
No, it does go onto the customer, but we still make a profit on, we'll make a return on this asset as part of our return. That's basically what a regulated utility is. It's not a markup on the energy itself. It's actually a return on your assets and recovery of your costs. So yes, we could recover the same amount those power purchases from Fortis. But we also would, with this project, reduce those costs and still make a return on that asset. So we're net better off.
Yeah, and just to speak to customer behavior, and I think Scott touched on it at the beginning. Right now, most meters in place in Nelson and most of Canada, for that matter, are basically they just basically measure how much power is being used, not when. And so a consumer is not incented currently to change their behavior. They're not aware. There's not an awareness typically of what the price of power is at any given time. And if you look at your own bill, you'll see that it's about 11 cents a kilowatt hour, no matter when you use that kilowatt hour. And so my hope would be, Mayor, yes, absolutely, people will become more aware of that, but the feedback is not quite there, right? And when it's cold and it's dark in the middle of December, people are going to turn their lights on and they're going to run their heat pumps and charge their EVs as they need to. And so the opportunity here is to we're not going to change that shape of the profile, but we're going to help to manage our exposure to Fortis as far as what we pay for that profile. Yeah.
Councillor Woodward.
So I feel like it's kind of instead of having these kind of quick peaks and valleys where it's leveling the whole process out and it's a buffer from these large shocks and drops. Is that a correct way of seeing it? It's kind of it's a guardrail almost in a sense to the whole system.
Yeah.
And it kind of smooths out the entire flow and gives us basically a backup. So we aren't just reliant on Fortis. We actually have the power ourselves. Is that the way of looking at it?
It's like the surge tank that goes to the sewer plant.
Well, a little.
It's like the what?
It's the surge capacity that we have put in front of the sewer plant. When the stormwater hits it, it holds there and then keeps bleeding off an even amount of water and everything else to the sewer. And that's what we're trying to do is capture that induced demand and have capacity in the system to meet that demand and then keep feeding off that demand, keep feeding off of Fortis what we need in a steady rate as opposed to a choppy rate. Yeah.
So I'd maybe characterize it, if we had extra generation and we knew that, December 29th, that at supper time, that we could just,
turn on more,
put more water through our generators and generate more power. We're not reducing, right? We're just using more of our own generation.
Right.
That's all we're doing. Buying less from Fortis, which means we don't hit that peak and we don't pay for that demand all year round.
So it's like installing another turbine in a different form.
That we just get to use on
demand.
On these couple peak times during that day where we really need that extra energy.
Regardless of water flow, because water comes in different patterns.
So we have this extra, we turn it on, we supply that extra demand for that, couple hours, and then it sits there dormant, and then next morning, again, we turn it back on. That would be my characterization of what we're doing.
Can I just clarify on that? I want to be careful with it's not quite like an extra turbine because what that chart shows is over the course of 24 hours. So you have inventory to deploy in usually a much shorter cycle. Okay, and so you do then need to refill the inventory, right?
Right.
And so whereas the turbine is sitting there ready to go, like a generator, a diesel gen or something like that, it's just supply. The battery has to be refilled in order to be that supply.
You don't have it all the time. You just have it a couple times.
And if you use it up for that day, it's gone.
So two questions, and you might get to this, so I apologize. Just stop.
Sure.
Number one is, this profile is today or historic. Have you done any projections looking forward, given EVs and what impact they may have charging overnight or all night, things like that?
Not at this level of detail, but I will be speaking to how we assess the benefit, and so I may answer that in coming up slides, and if not, let's come back to it.
Okay.
And is there another question before?
Well, I'll wait for the other slides then.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So that peak shaving is really a cost savings, and then the revenue preservation would be more on being able to continue to keep customers in outages electrified. Not all the customers. Obviously, if there's a tree through the lines, and the battery's on this side of it, you're not going to be able to keep everybody energized. But you'll be able to keep people online, some chunk of them anyway, which is a good story for the customers. And then from a revenue standpoint, you preserve the revenue during that outage that would have been lost had the whole part of the system been offline. Okay, and there is another aspect in the tariff called spinning reserve. We see in other markets. We've not included this in the analysis. We need to spend more time understanding that. It's certainly something that could be a revenue stream, but it's just not clear to us at this time. And we want to make comment on it, but we didn't want to include it as far as the benefit goes. So what we wanted to provide to Nelson Hydro and City Council is a realistic and a possible scenario here. And so getting back to the way the analysis was done is we looked back historically at an hourly level and basically built a model where we had a battery and we assessed a number of different scenarios on how many hours we could deploy this battery for and logic around that. And that's where we landed on this needing about 8 hours of duration in order to make a meaningful benefit to the peaks over the course of a year. And we took that hourly analysis and we applied it to the 20-year forecast that Nelson Hydro submits to FortisBC. Now, it's not at an hourly level, but it certainly does reflect a number of different offsetting expectations. And so there is some growth in there. There's also some expected reduction in demand, so different demand side management. And so the growth is quite subtle over the course of the forecast, and there are higher peaks through time. And so we took our expected benefit of the battery and applied that going forward to the peaks to assess the power supply charge and the monthly wires charge. We also degraded the battery over time, just like your cell phone, like I said earlier. Over the course of the 20 years of this project, the battery will not have the same duration at the end of it. These systems can degrade by 20 to 30%. There are strategies to manage that, but we've not included that in the analysis. And then we also included in the realistic case the reality, quite frankly, that we're not going to get it right all the time. Okay, there will be times where you deploy the battery and it's super cold, something happens, and there's another peak or an hour's missed or something like that. So the benefit might not quite be there. We believe that probability is lower of missing in the early part. So the first kind of 10 years, maybe it's 10%, but over the course it averages 15%, and on the back end, it's probably 20% where you just don't have as many hours to deploy the battery, and so the chance of missing that peak increases. The benefit increases over the course of the project, and I'll show you that on the next slide. And the reason is because although the battery degrades, the projected increase in tolls of 3.5% per year, which is held up historically, that increases faster than the battery degrades. And so even though you're shaving a lower volume over time, you're getting a bigger dollar impact and a bigger benefit to Nelson Hydro and its customers over that time frame. And so again, and then the difference between the realistic case and the possible is, in the possible case, you're perfect all the time, okay, as far as deploying it, and you've got a bit more energy over time as well. And so you got to be really good to reach the possible case, but we did want to make sure we articulated that there are days you could be really good, and maybe there are systems that are coming or some type of model that could be added to increase the probability of being right more often than we've projected in the realistic case. These systems do have operating costs. Those operating costs are things like insurance. There's dispatch costs. There's also going to be some type of a program with the vendor to keep the warranty in place. So you've got to make sure that this system is serviced regularly and monitored and so on. And it's an vested interest of both parties. So at the end of 20 years that this system is going to function in a certain way, and you've got to pay for that over the life of the system. And so we estimate that's about $137,000 on average, inflated at 2% over 20 years. And so when we take the realistic and possible benefit, we think the range after OPEX is about $400,000 to up to roughly $70,000 on average over the 20 years of the project. I did have a section there at the bottom talking about spinning reserve. We think it's possible. There's a revenue stream there, but again, we need some more time, more research, and more communication with Fortis on what that might look like. We need to understand how the battery is positioned within the system and so on. So that has not been included as far as a revenue stream for this analysis.
Can I just ask, have we considered selling into the grid?
It's not really. And the reason is because typically Nelson is importing from Fortis on a regular basis. Now, there is certainly when you are able to export to Fortis, this does happen during Fichette when there's a higher generation from the system as we're trying to move more water out of the basin. That will get picked up. So there is a benefit, but we didn't spend time trying to quantify to that detail. So there could be some benefit.
We can
Yeah.
talk about this
Sure.
a bit offline.
Sure.
So then as two things. Number one, as the battery degrades, cost goes up, I see that we're, the business case looks better over time. Also, adding to that, if say the next initiative we take after this is to start doing smart meters and doing that kind of side, that should also show up in terms of delivering increasing benefit, because now you've got two tools that are
Yes.
attacking the same problem.
Yeah, your peaks would be lower in theory.
Yeah. And then, so taking that in consideration, does that look like this sets up, is this sort of the foundational step, or would it have been smarter or something to consider maybe reversing those two? Or does it kind of matter? You want to do both eventually. This is more market ready. That's still not quite mature enough to tackle.
I can speak to that. So the timeline for our AMI project actually would put the smart meters in place prior to the implementation of the battery storage system. So we're looking at it as parallel efforts to try and tackle the challenges that we have looking forward. So, they're not mutually exclusive by any means. They're very complementary and will, inform us as we deploy smart meters. We'll get much better data that we can work with to, really refine the load profiles and, be able to predict more accurately what the demand is going to be, so that we're closer to perfect than perhaps what we've estimated right now. But this is still all yet to be defined, and none of the estimates that we've done here have really, we didn't want to be overly optimistic with this. We want to come at this from a, here's what we know it costs right now. Here's what we can predict to the best of our ability for benefits. And this is the results that you have in front of us. There is an optimistic case, but like, the questions have asked, it is also possible that battery systems might get more expensive, and there could be other things that change in the world. So right now, we think this is the best information that we can gather to put forward to council right now.
Great. So just to be clear then, this analysis does not include smart meters, but that does push us a little bit more towards the possible.
That's correct. Yeah, and I would just speak generally for British Columbia. It's my understanding they put this out in a couple of places that I think once Site C is complete, the intent is not to build new generation. The intent is to add systems like the one we're looking at, and then to manage the demand side of the equation through carrot and through stick is my understanding. And what I mean by that is, and Mayor, this might have touched on what you were looking at, is you maybe do get to a place where if you've got a high consumer at peak hours, you might need to pay more, right? And so a lot of these strategies are being contemplated provincially, nationally, globally, for that matter.
So there's always a wild card in that one, though. And the wild card is the province can step in and artificially keep the rates down, which has happened actually in the last, 5 years or so. Like, we're going to have Site C to pay for here, and
yes,
we're trying to keep the rates down so people get re-elected. So that's always the wild card, and
That wouldn't impact us though in this decision.
oh yeah, it would impact us. It means your return, you're not getting a proper return on your investment. Like,
Right, but we don't match our pricing to what BC Hydro is charging. Like the taxpayer would probably
well, we
pick up
buy
the.
it, sell to them, so how would that be?
Well,
Sell to
we
them,
buy
yeah.
through Fortis, who obviously buys through BC Hydro, so there's definitely some BC Hydro in our rates, and probably Fortis is probably a bit more broadly. We do have we price our own energy, within the city of Nelson, of what council wants, and
That's exactly what I mean.
And on the
That's
utility
what council
side,
wants,
Yeah,
not what's reality, right?
yeah.
sure.
Oh, you could get a council that, tried, did the same thing, and, it's, if you don't, ultimately you have to pay for it, right?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
Your assets ultimately have to be replaced. And you can only live so long of deferral accounts and not reinvesting in your assets. And ultimately, as we've seen in water and sewer, you have to raise those rates to replace that infrastructure. And, electrical utilities are the same.
I know this is going to take a while to go through this, and thanks very much for that. I just want to say at this point that it's good to have this conversation. I'm feeling a bit, I wish we'd have had it sooner, because there's a lot of clarity coming to the conversation tonight, and we're being asked to make a decision on this particular project with what I would say at the 11th hour, because we have a timeline on this grant application, right?
While the grant's in, there is no obligation on council to, if we were successful in the grant and council said, we're not interested in the project anymore and we don't want your grant, then council has that option. So the grant has been submitted. This is just to do the resolution. And there is no, presumably the grantor wants council to be serious that you are interested in this project, but at the end of the day, if the the pricing goes through the roof and it makes no sense, then we're going to reevaluate this at that time we are awarded that grant. Is what the assumptions we put in place, are they still valid? And if they are and it makes financial sense to go forward, then the council of the day would make that decision. If it's gone completely sideways and now it's a 30 million project and we get a grant of 7 million, then we probably say that doesn't make any sense to go ahead. So we're not tendering this, we're not awarding any contracts at this stage, we're just putting it through the grant application.
Yeah, but even with the grant, when I sit here, I feel somewhat uncomfortable. We've had this asset for 100 years, and we've been able to manage it with very thoughtful process, and we've kept it in line where it was manageable and able to continue to fund it. And I don't want to be the mayor that's saying, yes, we're going here, because I'm not comfortable with where I'm at. I'll tell you right now, I've got some questions. I've made several notes tonight that this is not a comfortable project for me. There's a lot of risk here. And there's a lot of risk with the technology. There's risk with the financial side of it. And there's a lot of guys slapping us on the back for being the first. I'd like to see them come to the table. So we'll assume some of that risk with you. This is our asset. It's paid the bills in this community for over 100 years. And I don't want to be the guy that risks it going forward. And when I asked earlier about, is this the project you would spend $4.5 million on? I was surprised to hear vegetation wouldn't be the one. Because if we wanted to give reliable energy to people, that's one of the ways we could do it. This is a long conversation tonight to be in the middle of a meeting that I don't think we have enough time to make an informed decision on this. I need more time to digest what's on this page here. And Chris, I'm seeing a lot of words like possible and possibly, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm always sort of afraid of those assumptions when I'm listening to a presentation.
I just have to state that it's not your decision. It's
No, I
council's
understand.
decision. So I feel like you're really kind of laying down a fairly thick layer of uncertainty, and we still have to decide as a council.
Right, exactly.
Right? So,
And
you're.
Okay, well, let me rephrase
I
that.
feel like you're really tainting.
Finish the presentation.
You're tainting the process by. I mean, you have weight as the mayor, but this is a council decision, right?
That's fair.
So, I just
That's
feel
fair.
like you gotta be careful how you move along here.
That's fair.
One slide.
Janice, Councillor Morrison, yeah.
I'm just, are you finished? like is there more to this presentation? I'm sorry, I was off camera to allow for good reception. I'm just wondering, are you finished? You look like you still got something to say.
There are a couple more slides.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. And so, just to kind of look at the project over the 20-year life, that's what this slide is trying to articulate. And realistic and possible, from a realistic case, is a 5% return, and the payback is in 13 years. There's potential that that happens sooner, and 11% and 9 years. The cost of the battery is a major consideration. I mean, you're going to pay for it up front, and the benefit is spread over 20 years. And there's a wide range of potential outcomes. And nobody knows how this is going to go. I totally recognize and appreciate the uncertainty here. We're dealing with it in every project we're looking at as well. And so, yeah, with that, I'll pass it back to Scott. And thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Chris has articulated the technical details very well, and I really appreciate the questions that council has put forward, and I'm looking forward to answering more questions at the end. Just to kind of cap things off with the presentation, the next actions that the group is looking at right now, we will continue to work on the lands piece and the First Nations consultation piece, because we need to do that for North Shore Substation regardless. So there's still going to be activity going on. We may get an early indication of whether this project is going to be moving forward by the end of this year, in December of 2022, when provincial funding will be announced. But we won't receive full approval for the project until sometime in the third quarter of 2023. So there's
Or maybe
still
2024,
quite,
based on their track record.
Yeah, depending on how that goes. But that's sort of what they're stating so far. So there's time for us to continue to evaluate and look at that. And the project team will keep an eye on that in terms of industry trends, where the grant's going, any other sort of factors that may be coming along. So in the next 18 months to 24 months, we're going to continue to be looking at it. And to address, at least to start to address the mayor's concerns around risk, I just want to reemphasize. So the resolution that Nelson Hydro is putting forward today is to commit to funding of the 4.6 million that would be the City of Nelson portion of the project, should the project be approved. Now, if the project is not approved by either federal or provincial, we would not be moving forward. We would go back to our plan of our North Shore substation, and we would know that in time to carry on with the plans for the North Shore substation replacement on the timeline that's already in our capital plan. So there's no risk to sort of like, okay, or are we potentially delaying something else that we would do? Right now, they're completely parallel, and we will manage both projects so that once we know, we will be able to take advantage of that. And as Kevin had indicated earlier, if the project, if and when the funding is announced and if it's approved, then at that time, Nelson Hydro would re-look at all of the factors that we've looked at. And we've been very thorough, and I hear your comment, Mayor, that you haven't had much time to absorb all of this. Frankly, it has been a lot of work to try and get to this point, and we didn't want to come to council with just the high level estimate that PRISM had given us, because we'd be sitting here saying, oh, the project's going to be $10 million and crossing our fingers that we didn't get it wrong. We've done a lot of work in the last month, thanks to Chris and Christine and the rest of the project team that have done the due diligence to get us to this point and put this application in, and we feel we're realistic with it, and we didn't feel comfortable coming to council any sooner than today. We do have until the 24th or 25th of June to submit the resolution to the CleanBC that will allow the application to continue moving forward. So they gave us essentially a month from the initial deadline. So there is time for more discussion if council wishes. However, if we miss the deadline of June 25th, then that's it. We now just wrap it up and we start focusing on building our North Shore sub. If the project goes forward and it's approved, and Nelson Hydro does all of its due diligence and says, oh, the project is now 30 million because things have changed and things are bad, we will come to our council with a recommendation to, appropriate to whatever situation has changed. So if it's not economically viable or things have evolved and we don't want that, the recommendation will be, no, we're going to carry on with doing our North Shore substation and other projects that are going to help us with these and put more energy into our demand side management, whatever those things are. We would be able to make those decisions in 2 years' time with no risk between now and that time. So the resolution that's before council today is about, should we be in a position where we have an approval from the CleanBC and federal government in a year and a half or 2 years' time, will the City of Nelson support that project if it's economically viable, essentially?
So just on that note, Scott, the resolution actually doesn't say that. And I think going forward, for me to have a comfort, and I agree with Councillor Woodward, it's a council decision, but I think the resolution would need to be changed to reflect most of what you just said, to protect the asset and protect the.
In what way?
In what way?
Pardon me?
In what way would you want
Well,
it to
as an
change?
example, and this is just an example.
Yeah.
Further up on the page here, it says if the grant is not approved or a project's economics have changed substantially at a time of the grant approval, the City of Nelson can reallocate reserve funds back to the North Shore, a substation Coffee Creek transformer project. Now, that's just an example, but it still doesn't cover, from my opinion, and again, it's up to the table, in my opinion, it still doesn't cover us that we wouldn't be in this project. What I tried to say earlier was this is a very important topic that I'm not sure we totally understand at this point in time. And I kind of wish we'd have had maybe a workshop prior to this to go through it, like that would have really brought Chris in and we could have gone through this and get some real detail on it. I'm worried about the risk factor. And again, I want to go back to what I said earlier. If the project's doable, viable, and it's a wave of the future, I'm all for it. But would Fortis and BC Hydro accept some of that risk with us?
When you say risk, what are you afraid the risk is?
I'm afraid the risk is that we're going to have a 16 point some odd $1 million project, which let's assume that's the number, okay, for talk's sake.
That's what
Right.
we're presuming, yeah.
So we're assuming that's the number. That we don't know what it's going to be 20 years from now when we go to upgrade that project. Revamp it, rebuild it, put new batteries in it. We have no idea what that's going to look like.
But we will
Well,
save.
already paid for
We'll already
itself.
pay
Yeah,
for itself.
the cost.
These are assumptions,
Can we move?
remember? And Chris, I think, qualified that quite clearly.
Janice has her hand up, and then Christine has something that she'd like to say as well.
No, okay, Janice, go ahead. You're welcome.
Thank you. So I want to thank all of the speakers and presenters tonight, Christine and the other man that was in the room there, and Chris and Scott. And I actually, at this point, would like to move the motion as it is written in tonight's docket. And if there's a seconder, I would then like to speak to the motion.
One or two? Two, I
The
guess, right?
recommendation.
The second?
The recommendation.
Oh, the recommendation. Yep, got it.
There's one. Go ahead, Janice.
So, I hear, Mary, your concerns about risk, but having sat around the table for a considerable amount of time, and looked at projects that have come forward. We went through all this with district energy funding, looking at a number of models that we committed to try to find funding. It never came through. We reevaluated the program. We realized it wasn't the program for us, given in part the lay of the land and the granite one would have to drill through on the way to actually accommodating a district energy source. We've looked at biochar projects to do the DES with. We've done a number of these projects, and I don't think, I think it's given us a lot of knowledge, and I don't think that it has risked the reputation of Nelson Hydro in any regard as we have done those. You know, we have a much smaller project. We have the solar garden that eventually will have to be replaced or dismantled in about 20 years. I mean, all these things have a life and a life cycle. I'm clearly hearing here that if we even want to contemplate this going further, that we need to be looking at some of a resolution to continue to work forward on this. Otherwise, it dies basically here and now. And what I particularly like about this is that this funding isn't available for 2 years. The money doesn't have to be spent until 2027, which I think also allows, I mean, the thing in my mind is it allows us to be able to see if in the time frame there is also better technology, whether or not we have better battery storage, whether Elon Musk has invented something else. This isn't a project that's going to be built in the next 18 months, and I would doubt by the time that we would start to build it that we would exactly be the leaders of the pack at that time. So I'm confident in the work that's been done so far. I'm very interested to see more work done, but I'm not going to see that work done unless we pass this resolution that's on the table before us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Yeah. Councillor Lockenberg. And then Councillor Page. Go ahead. You go ahead, Councillor Page. Sorry, you again.
What about Christine?
Well, you have a resolution on the table. Do you?
Yeah, no, Christine, do you have to hold on for a minute? Councillor Page, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a deep comfort level with this project. I have spoken about these kinds of projects and how they might fit with Nelson Hydro in the past. You guys have all heard me speak to that. So to see this level of detail brought forward in a program that either if we do okay, will pay for itself, and if we do well, will pay for itself even faster, assuming some of the inflationary costs that we have built in here. And so it is clear to me that we have that opportunity to take those high demands in the middle of the day and in the early mornings and trade them for the low usages at night. And so there's an overall reliability and optimization and cost savings that will only be compounded when we roll out advanced metering later on. And we certainly don't expect to be driving our vehicles around after 30 or 40 years, and so we shouldn't expect that our utility should have the same technological makeup after 50 or 60 or 70. And so this seems to me, from my perspective, to be the right kind of technology to be implementing for a utility of our size to service our customers in a reliable and effective manner that guards them against the increasing costs that will come down the chute later on. It would be unfortunate for us if down the road something really extravagant had happened and we were not able to renew such a piece of infrastructure for in a way that would recoup its cost in the long term. But that simply means that we would have had the 20 years where this project was able to provide us benefits. So I don't see where the benefit would be lost. And so I support this. I think we're ready to go find out some more. And I think we also have lots of mitigating factors in this particular project that everyone has already spoken to that helps give me assurances that if we do need to make other choices in how this is implemented, that we will have the time and space and ability to do that. And if it gets to a point where lithium goes another 5 or 10 or 15 magnitude increase, that will just be where we found ourselves, 2 years ago with district energy, a system set of projects we had inherited from previous councils where we said, we're not going to go forward with this. So I think this is going to be successful. I think it's going to help us a lot. I think it's going to help us provide better quality quality power and better quality service out to our customers. So I support it.
Thank you. Mr. Lockenberg?
I would agree with Councillor Page on that one. I do support this project too. I had a question about the contingency, but I'll make my argument first. Why I think this is important. I feel like when you have, there's only a few utilities in this province that are capable of doing a project like this, and if we're competing with BC Hydro, you do not want to be behind that elephant when it comes to competing for batteries or for systems or for work. I mean, I feel like we've been burned already trying to explore the acquisition of electric buses when we're sort of the last in line. And so there's a risk, I think, for not going first when you're up against BC Hydro. If we delay and BC Hydro steps in and makes a big bet, does that impact our ability to acquire the batteries or the capabilities to do this? So that's, in my mind, that seems to be a risk. As far as on the contingency side of that 25%, it feels like you guys have looked at the risk and have sort of baked that into this calculation with that 25% contingency. Just so I can understand, I think I can guess at the answer, but let's say we do well on this project, and the money's already committed from the province and the feds. Does that 25% all come back to us? No. Or no, we'd have to, I was just sort of reaching there, but I assume we have to share it back to the province and to the feds.
It's that cost percentage. And just to be clear for council, that's, and I think I'm right, that's the construction contingency, not
The cost
a risk contingency of whatever. So yes, it could relate to higher lithium prices that makes the build more expensive or the design it. It's just the level of the estimate at this time is when as you refine the design and get closer to knowing exactly what you're building, then that contingency comes down. But we're at a Class B estimate right now, and it's kind of industry standard of what you use for construction and design estimates.
Yeah.
Any further speakers?
Well, I had a follow-up, but it sounded like you just wanted to respond to that.
Oh, I just to be clear, so the 25% is for your known unknowns. There's things that we know we are uncertain about, and so we have included a contingency to be part of that
Overall.
Overall, and in terms of how the funding works, it's basically a reimbursable type of funding. So we submit a receipt saying like a quarterly bill to the ICIP, and then they would send us a check for 73% of that back. So it's kind of like it's going to be an ongoing thing. And so if the project comes in at 14 million, then we will get reimbursed 73% of that 14 million.
Right. Well,
if we send it for the 18 million, we don't get reimbursed.
Exactly. So it's if at this point it's better for us to be on the high side than on the low side. So right now we're applying for a total project cost of 16.7 million.
Yeah.
If it comes in at 18 million, that additional 2 million that comes out of Nelson Hydro's
Got it.
capital reserve. So we're just trying to manage that effectively.
If I may, I just also wanted to just speak briefly to the 16 points.
Didn't hear you, Chris.
Sorry, I just wanted to speak briefly to this 16.7 million and kind of delineate between that and the forecast or the estimate going forward. The 16.7 million is based on real world hard numbers today, and we have added some cost increases to that, and so that cost will change. We're not sure where it's going to go, but anything in the data submitted tonight, that's the most reliable piece that's in there. The analysis going forward, certainly I do use words like possible and realistic. It's very difficult to make 20-year predictions, but I just wanted to emphasize that cost piece is as good as it's going to get today for a Class B estimate.
Yeah. So my supplemental and final comment on that is, Mayor, I appreciate the risk. I think it's something when it's a 4.4 million, it's a serious undertaking, and I really respect your concern about protecting that risk. But I want to reiterate again, I think there's also a risk on the other side. Nelson Hydro's competitive advantage when you look out at the landscape of utilities and is that we're nimble and that we're innovative. And sometimes part of what we do has to be, we have to take a bit of a risk on one side so that we can start reaping the rewards in terms of grants. If we do this and it's successful, I think it looks a lot better for us in the future in getting partners or support from the federal government or the province for the next project. So I hear you. I respect that concern, but I really support this.
Thank you. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Mayor. So the realistic return on investment is 400 grand a year. And that's where that's a 13-year payback on the 4.6 out of the capital reserve, correct?
Yes.
And CFO Jury, how much is in the, or maybe Scott, you can answer that, how much is in the reserve?
I believe the number, well, Chris, if you want to just comment, but I believe the number was like currently sitting at just over 8 or something like that. The reserve is quite healthy today, but we projected that out over the 20 years as well to see sort of like, as the flows, in terms of operating costs and the potential savings that we're projecting, and we're able to manage that within the range. But we currently, in the 5-year forecast that we have right now that council would have seen in November, we were going to be dipping quite heavily into that, and this, if we do go forward with this project versus the North Shore sub, we're actually delaying some of those costs a little bit, but we're still going to see that dip. But then as soon as that project kicks in, then those reserves rebound quite significantly.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's just further to what Scott said there, just deferring or I guess reallocating the costs that were meant for the North Shore substation to the battery project doesn't really change the projections for the capital reserve. It keeps everything pretty much in line. Of course, 10 years down the road, then we would have that, if that's kind of where we're moving it to, 10 years down the road, then we would have the North Shore substation project. But if we're looking at this and we're estimating, we're paying back kind of in that same time frame where we've kind of recovered our funds from the battery project around the same time as we're starting the North Shore substation. It kind of, everything sort of slots in place.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Page.
I did want to take us to some new territory that we haven't touched on. So we've talked to
the motion.
This is part of the battery BES, of course. We've talked a lot about the financials, risks, all the capitalization markets, all that good jazz. One of the questions I have when it comes to the retirement of these particular units is what does that look like from an environmental perspective? What is the recyclability of these units? What will be the disposal costs? I anticipate we will be able to swap out modules as need be, and there'll be other optimization strategies, but I think the public will be interested to know when it comes to this kind of technology, what is the end of life plan?
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question. It's one that we're thinking about quite a bit, because increasingly, if you've got a system that is still 70% or 80% of what it was originally, there's a lot of useful life left in that system. And so the answer to the question, the simple answer is I'm not quite sure, because I don't know if you'll scrap it at the end of 20 years. And it does come down to what vendor you select and how that warranty is managed, and make sure that the system is maintained. But it may not be 20 years and you're done. You may get more life out of it. With that said as well, you may not. My understanding, and I think we could come back to you with more detail on this, is that there are a lot of companies that are heavily invested in understanding what to do with grid scale batteries and used energy cells and so on. And so I don't think there's a plan, Councillor. However, I think that one will come to fruition if it helps. We are currently modeling a salvage value. We think that at the end of life for projects that we're looking at, that there is going to be someone really interested in taking it off our hands. And so it's a question mark. I think it actually could have monetary value at the end of 20 years. When you present value that back, it's not worth much. I don't know if it's 30% of the project, but there's a chance it's still running in year 21. and providing benefit, and you could augment it or not, or turn away from it. So it's not a great answer, I realize that, but our thinking is shifting actually just over the last few months as we've been looking at this ourselves.
Further question, Janice?
No, I don't have any further questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for asking, though.
For me to add an amendment to this, would I have to pass the gavel?
You can propose an amendment.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, if you want to include that other piece, that's
Yeah.
already in the report, that's what the plan is.
so there's a piece in the report, I'm just getting some instructions here from Sarah, so.
Mayor, I'm just noticing that Christina's had her hand up for some time. I don't know whether or not there was some point or something that she wanted to address, and because her and I have been off camera for better reception, I don't know whether or not you've noticed that.
Christine, are you still there?
I am. Thank you, Janice. I appreciate that.
Sorry, I didn't see your.
There were a couple of points. There's a couple of points that I wanted to make. Mayor, you mentioned earlier that you would like to see BC Hydro and Ford step up and onboard some of the risk of this project. And I just want to point out that if that were the case, then the grant funding portion of the project changes significantly. BC Hydro is, if BC Hydro were to become your partner in this project, the grant funding would not be available at all because BC Hydro is an arm of the government. Now, if FortisBC were to board as a partner with this project, then the cost to Nelson Hydro would rise to 60% as opposed to the 27% that is currently projected. So bringing on a partner, there is some benefit in spreading the risk, but the cost increases to Nelson Hydro. I had my hand up for so long I forgot my other point, but let's stop there.
Yeah, I think the partner is the provincial federal government in this. They're the 73% partner.
And having said that, we have had conversations with BC Hydro and FortisBC, and they're both very interested in supporting us in other ways than, say, a financial share. There's lots of discussions around sharing information, and they're working at similar projects in parallel, so we would be able to identify areas where we could benefit this project through that.
Thanks, Christine. That clears up the risk portion of it. And if the mover of the motion, the concern I have with the motion that's on the table is, while I hear the assurance that we won't go forward with the project, should all the alignment, should everything not align, it's been my experience in the past that it probably should be written into a resolution somewhere. And the reason I bring that up is on the benefits and disadvantage and negative impact. Now, this doesn't totally cover it either, but with council's consent, I did outline a piece here. If the grant is not approved or the project's economics have changed substantially at the time of the grant approval, the City of Nelson can reallocate the reserve funds back to the North Shore Substation and Coffee Creek Transformer Project. If council was agreeable, if we added that to the existing motion, I think it would give direction to staff as to when to say, hold it a minute, this project's not going to work, and here's our next phase or our next step. Would that be?
I would, because all that,
I just suggest all that says is we can reallocate it, doesn't say we will. So I think, to me, if we said if the grant is not approved or project economics have changed substantially at the time of the grant, this project will come back to council for approval.
Would that be seen up for the mover? Would that be fair?
I would take that, because I don't think this is an either or, and I don't think we should be particularly earmarking that project, because in this time frame, that project may also look different. So I don't like the idea that it's, that by adding in what you read out of the text of the report, including the reallocation to the North Shore project, I would just soon have that left out. But the CAO has suggested there, I would be fine with adding in if that gives some clarity. That I mean, to me, it's already clear, but if that gives more clarity, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So we would leave out the piece to reallocate the reserve fund back to the North Shore substation and Coffee Creek transformer.
Yeah.
I don't want the Coffee Creek transformer that you're putting that in there.
No. Right.
I won't accept that change.
Okay. Sarah's going to read back what you just said. Then.
So, if the grant is not approved or project economics have changed substantially at the time of grant approval, this project will come back to council for
approval.
Yeah.
I can second that.
Yep.
I'm fine with that change.
Okay. So then the resolution would read including that then?
Yep,
Sarah?
so the whole resolution would be that the City of Nelson hereby commits to the following.
Regarding the Nelson Hydro Battery Energy Storage Project, to cover up to 4.6 million of assigned funds from the Nelson Hydro Capital Reserve towards the applicant share of eligible project costs under the grant program. And further, if the grant is not approved or project economics have changed substantially at the time of grant approval, this project will come back to council for reconsideration.
Okay, perfect.
Is that an amendment?
I think
Friendly.
the mover
That's
and
a
the
friendly
seconder.
amendment, so it stays within the motion according
yeah.
to the seconder. So if the seconder's okay with what she said she was, then.
I moved it and I'm fine with it.
The mover second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the new motion now, so it would come back to council for approval should it not meet the.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you.
Thanks,
you
Christopher.
guys.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Christina?
you. Very exciting.
Amazing.
Yes.
How fast will it charge my phone?
Really fast. Pull your phone out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the great presentation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks, Christine.
Thanks, Janice. Next up is the council indemnity review policy. At the end of each council term and in advance of the general municipal election, council reviews its remuneration. In advance of this year's review process, staff are proposing the council repeal the council indemnity review policy number 0550-00015 and replace it with the policy outlined in this report in an effort to improve the review process. Now, hopefully, again, everybody's taken time to review this document and are comfortable with it. And if you are, there's 1 and 2 resolutions here.
I'll move the first one.
Councillor Renwick, Councillor
I'll second that.
Woodward, thank you. Question or comment on number 1? No question, Councillor Page.
Sorry, maybe I'm on the wrong one.
You're on the council.
We're on the repeal.
Yeah.
The current.
Repeal the current one.
Repeal.
And replace, repeal and replace. My question in going through these particular documents is if going to a pool of 8 similar municipalities is the right approach, and if we should not instead be looking at our own relationship between remuneration for council and its ratio to what our staff are earning, and whether or not we want to be following our own organization in terms of figuring out what the remuneration be. I'm not suggesting we increase or decrease. I'm simply suggesting that instead of us pegging ourselves to a group of municipalities that we are hoping are also following some sort of value-based methodology to determine what an appropriate fund should be, that we instead take where we are now and peg ourselves to our own payroll that we put out for our staff, and saying that our compensation is connected to what our pool of staff is making, as opposed to some other, because we do know through the other policy engagements that we do to determine fair prices or fair compensation for our staff, that we do that digging and that searching what is a fair package of remuneration. So I feel like we could easily peg ourselves just to that instead, and then it would be kept internal and consistent.
So just for information, we do peg ourselves to these same 8 municipalities, so. So
staff
I
does.
think, yeah.
Oh.
So basically all we're recommending for council is we had used the same comparators that we use for staff. We're already doing that work in pegging. If you want us to just figure out what that comparison is now and do that, we could do that, because I don't know those relationships of their councils to, their
Right.
staff, but we're just looking for a less complicated way to do this going
Mechanism,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're, personally, we're fine with either. I just want you to know, we peg against these same municipalities that we're proposing. And I think when we
Just,
looked at it last time, we did use these same municipalities, and I think council made that decision at the end of the day based on
So,
this review.
Kevin, like Councillor Page raises, a really good point here, actually. And I just asked Sarah, she's gonna have to look at the community charter, I think.
Well, but I think it might be in your procedure bylaw, or
Yeah.
else it is in keeping with the existing policy that council does look at remuneration for the incoming council. Kevin?
There's nothing in the community charter. This is
No, but it-
strictly up to the council.
I'm saying it might be in, I believe it's in their procedure bylaw, but there's if they require themselves, or else it's in this existing. policy.
It's in the policy, yeah.
It's in the policy, but it's not in
Yeah.
the community charter.
Oh, it's not in the, no.
So we could actually not have this. We could do exactly what staff does and go on as an example, we could go on the rate of inflation, we could say, no, we're not getting a raise, etc.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure we're actually getting fair feedback by going out to the 8 municipalities that we traditionally go to. I know that you probably think you are, but it just seems to me that, I don't know, it just seems to me it can become a problem if it needs to be more cut and dry, like the stipend now is getting to the point where, maybe it should be a conversation around, the rate of inflation going forward, rather than going out and searching with other municipalities
can
and
I-
using that to justify.
Yeah, I just
You
want to,
understand?
yeah, so just for the policy, just to understand, so there's 2 components to it, right? There's, during the term of council, it is inflationary.
Yeah, that's
And
correct.
then what we do is every so often say, are we still in the right place? And, that would make council, if we come back and say, we did this review and this would cut everybody in half or double everybody, then it's just that touch point, or are we still,
Balance, yeah.
are we still in the right range? And if there was a big anomaly there, then we would obviously go, well, something's wrong here. Maybe we don't have the right communities, maybe something else happened there, but we're open to whatever council wants. We're just trying to simplify the process.
I would just say both. That looking out into the world and looking at our own situation and combining it would probably be the most, in my mind, the most sort of even-keeled way of moving forward.
But we have to give them we have to agree on a formula.
Right.
Right? So they can run the numbers.
So I think that the recommendation here is, like, I feel like, staff has worked at this. This is not just coming out of nowhere. They're trying to do the best situation for what we have. So I would just recommend that we move forward with what this staff has done so that we can get a good view of what's out there.
Okay, so
Because
we
at
have-
the end, when it comes back, right,
Yeah.
we still have a choice of what we're going to do with it.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree. So we're repealing it. It's just an opportunity. If you wanted to change it, once you repeal it, that's the time to change it. So.
This won't be coming back to us, will it?
No.
No. This is the policy. There's no third
Placing it
reading.
immediately.
Right, so right
This is
tonight,
now.
we're going to repeal this and replace it with the new wording. So this is your chance to change it if you wish, or leave it exactly as it is. As you say, Councillor Woodward, it actually covers both angles.
I
Really.
feel like the staff has tried best to cover. It's a challenging situation. There's no doubt about it. This is a challenging problem. It's challenging for every council, but staff is trying to do its best to find a good answer.
Why they bring it to us.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a mover and a seconder?
Yep.
All in favour of repeal?
Repeal and replace.
Yeah. Janice, are you still with us there? Yeah, okay, carried. Now we're on to Council Indemnity Policy 055-0000016 to rename as Council Remuneration Policy.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Renwick. No questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Okay, where the heck are we here? Council reports, if there are any.
There's a couple,
It's not a cow.
couple standard there, information items.
Information items, sorry, that's the first one that comes up.
Yeah.
Information items, accounts payable. Colin's gone, I see the Rusty Moose went with him.
Still.
Anything on the accounts payable?
I did have something, sorry, I just jumped out. One moment. I'll just email them.
Pardon?
I'll email them.
Okay, fair.
We don't need to do it here.
Okay.
Just jumped right out.
Actually,
Was that?
Hungry. Never mind.
You can remember one of them?
Concrete, there was
Concrete.
There's $100,000
Yeah.
charge for concrete forms, and we were obviously carpooled, so I was wondering, Nicole had, whatever. What is that for? What company is the concrete forming from, and where are we spending $100,000?
You probably have to find an answer to that. It could be anywhere from the dam to
Concast Concrete Products with a K,
Probably like Nelson Hydro, I would guess,
right?
or sidewalk work. I think,
Could have been
I think
for the-
Rockform normally does most of
I
our,
think when we did the tour of the hydro plant, they redid the
yeah.
Oh, right.
bridge and the
that's right.
support walls on the hydro plant.
I suspect that's what it is. But we can send you that out.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
find.
I've got a couple, I'll email you. Thanks.
We have a whole power plant full of concrete.
Yeah. Anything else there? Building permits, you're okay with that? That's rolling along, thank you. Somebody like to move receipt of those reports, please? Councillor Charlwood and Councillor Lochtenberg, all in favour? Carried. Next one is minutes. So you get a Cultural Development Committee and the Public Library. They have their monthly meetings, like most, some of the other committees don't. We okay with everything in front of us there? Move receipt, please. Councillor Page, thank you. Councillor Renwick, all in favour? Carried. Now we have the late item, which is the letter from the Chamber. And I assume this is a bit late in the day because they weren't sure what was going to happen with COVID. So they're basically asking us for a contribution to the Canada Day. Pardon me? $3,000 to the Canada Day celebrations. And since it's the first one we've had in 3 years, Councillor Woodward says it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Move.
Make it 9.
Pardon?
We haven't had one in 3 years, we should make it 9 grand, no? The hell of a display, right?
But they didn't do anything for 2 of those.
3 cakes.
Take an extra big cake, triple layer.
That's a lot of cake. Second by Councillor Lochtenberg. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none? All in favour? Thanks very much. Anything else here, Sarah? We got, okay?
In camera item.
Oh, the release.
Finisher
No, we're not done that yet. So,
This is to apply for the grant. So it is released from,
sorry?
oh, so the item in camera item is released to the public.
Number 14.
It's part of the agenda.
Yeah, we have to go back.
This is from last.
Oh, the previous
yeah,
meeting.
Previous meeting, yeah.
Okay.
I'll,
Okay, released to the public from the council meeting, May the 3rd, sorry, yeah, 2022, the in-camera session.
I'll move
Moved by
that.
Councillor Woodward.
It's already done.
Councillor
It's done,
Renwick.
we're just
All in-
releasing
This
it.
is
We're
the
just
part where it
releasing.
is.
Yeah,
Was released.
carried, thank you.
Release
All right.
All right.
Out into the world.
that you saw on Thursday.
I thought we just dealt with the Nelson Hydro application grant.
And it was presented initially in
Yeah,
camera.
In
in a
camera.
closed meeting, and that's brought out, yeah.
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 But we released it then,
Yeah.
so
Should've
this
released
is where
it at
it
the
showed
start of
up.
the
Not in this meeting, yeah.
Should've released it at the start.
Motion to adjourn
Yes.
this meeting. Moved by Councillor Renwick. Boy, the hands were not pretty quick there, I'll tell you. And second by Councillor Lochtenberg. All in favour? Carried.
We're not done.
Thanks,
We gotta go back
Chris.
in camera.
We're not done. Thanks,
Oh, but
Kevin.
he has to go.
And thanks, Sarah. Thanks, no, John.